Welcome to the 18th episode of the Laziness stream. This time, it's gonna have to be a little quick because I have some stuff to do, but it'll be fine. Okay? Mike is good. Alright. Alright, we're just gonna dive right in, and considering the game I'm playing currently, we're gonna read 2 or 3 ocean-related ones. So, the first one we're reading is What Lurks in the Marianas Trench. So let's just get started. Let me take a sip of my drink here. Pumpkin spice kefir. It's good. I don't know. It's good. Alright, let's do it. Did you know that we've mapped more of the surface of Mars than our very own oceans? How has our curiosity driven us to space travel, but not to explore the most perplexing mystery that lies on our very own planet? I've explored much of our waters myself, mapping and documenting our oceans and seas. I have learned that we are better off to just leave what lies below the waves alone. I grew up by the ocean. In my youth, I loved to explore the tide pools and sea caves that dotted the east coast. I loved to see the life interacting with each other. Crabs scuttling away when a big fish swam by, or an octopus camouflaging itself undetectable until its prey made the fatal mistake of getting too close. The sea was always just so interesting to me. When I turned 13, my father bought me a cheap scuba set off the internet. It only allowed for 20-minute excursions underwater, but man, if I didn't cherish it. I would dive at least twice a day, blowing all my allowance on air tank fill-ups and footage for my underwater camera. Most of my childhood was spent under the sea. Oh yeah, got a text. Alright. As I grew, my interest for the water developed from a hobby into a fully fledged career. I received my degree in marine biology with the highest marks in my class, and was almost immediately hired by the Poseidon Foundation. Poseidon was a great place to work. I got to travel the globe, documenting new species and reclassifying the old ones. Here, I met people who shared my passion for the waters on Earth and discovering what dwells within them. I was a model employee. My data never had mistakes and was never once late. I quickly rose through the ranks until I was the right-hand man of the CEO, Barry Henderson. He was an amazing man, with love for the oceans that even surpassed my own. The man had a twinkle, a spark of curiosity that all great explorers possessed. He was not my boss, but my friend. Barry's life goal was to chart the bottom of the Marianas Trench, the deepest pit in the world. Every time we were together, it was the same old story. "What do you think is at the bottom?" he would ask me. "Something new," I would always retort. "One day, me and you, we're gonna go down there." Of course, an expedition to the bottom of the ocean would cost huge sums of money, which would simply bankrupt the company. But I knew Barry would be unable to rest until he got what he desired. Hang on, got another text, sorry. Alright, sorry about that. It was a rainy afternoon. I was sitting in my office drinking a coffee and finishing up a report on a new species of starfish my team had discovered off the coast of Australia when Barry burst in. "Lucas, it's happened! By God, it's happened!" "Huh?" "The department accepted my request to fund our expedition to the bottom of the sea!" The following months were spent preparing the submarine. It had to be perfect. That far underwater would put tons of water pressure on every square inch of the hull. I could hardly contain my excitement for what lay ahead. What kind of diverse life could exist that far below the waves? Only one expedition had ever been made before ours, and it lasted less than 20 minutes. Our submarine was designed to be submerged for over 20 hours. Barry and I would be true modern-day pioneers. The Triton finished construction in less than 2 months, and by God, the thing was a tank. 40-inch thick walls left more interior space to be desired, but it was plenty of room to house just the two of us. The best flashlight money could buy was mounted on the bottom, illuminating whatever light in front in dazzling white light. 2 robotic arms were attached to either side, giving us the ability to grab whatever was lying down there to meet us, and document it. We submerged on the 12th of July. The excitement that boiled inside me as we sank to the ocean completely pushed aside. Wait, what? Sorry, I got a text. Be smooth? What? I don't know what that means. We submerged on the 12th of July. The excitement that boiled inside me as we sank to the ocean completely pushed aside the nervousness that accompanied anyone facing the unknown. I could barely sit still as we sank further and further into the murky depths. "We'll reach the bottom in less than 10 minutes!" Barry exclaimed. You have not experienced true darkness until you have been to the bottom of the ocean. Any traces of sunlight died out miles above us, leaving me and my partner in the utter blackness that is the deep sea. Even our fluorescent light had dimmed down to nothing but an orange glow. We could see less than 20 feet in front of us, but that did not stop Barry or I from getting straight to work. In less than 45 minutes, we had discovered over 32 species of deep-sea fish, 3 types of crustaceans, and 2 types of octopi. It was marvelous. Never in my life had I had so much fun. The biology in the trench was so diverse and unique. I had never seen anything like it before. Barry and I were discussing our first hour findings when we felt a jolt on the right side of our ship. It knocked us back several feet and sent me out of my chair and onto the floor. "What was that? Are you okay?" Barry screamed. Of course, no one heard him. Along with the petrifying darkness came soundlessness. The world below was nigh mute. It held a very disturbing vibe. I'm fine. What was that?" I asked, pulling myself back onto the chair. Barry did not answer. A thick, long maroon tentacle did, slapping the front glass with a gut-wrenching, meaty sound. "What the hell?" Barry cried out. The tentacle, which must have been 25 feet, wrapped the front of our machine like a fish caught by a squid. I was dumbfounded. Was it a giant squid? No, they don't live that deep underwater. It wasn't possible. It had to be something new. I sprang into action and took control of both the robotic arms. I gripped the tentacles as firmly as the machine could and ripped it off furiously. Whatever it was attached to quickly scurried away. Barry started, but didn't finish. We both knew that we had just discovered something. Something big. "Let's follow it," I decided. The submarine turned in the direction that the thing went in. We followed a trail of half-eaten fish and overturned stones to something we both had not expected to see that deep. A spear. It was made from some kind of metal, and it looked almost new. "This is freaky," Barry stated. We followed the trail further. Neither of us wanted to give up on what could be the biggest discovery of the decade. But then it happened again. Harder. The familiar jolt and thudding sound, this time knocking us both out of our chairs. "Jesus!" I cried. Then it came again. Another thud, from the opposite side of our cramped ship. Then another, and another, and another. They happened rapid fire, hit after hit. I felt like I was stuck in an intense game of Pong. Then we saw it. An unintelligible mass moving slowly towards us from the thick blanket of darkness, edging closer and closer every minute. It was not a squid coming towards us, nor was it an octopus. It was a monster. It had the face of a human, if humans lived at the bottom of the ocean. Huge, glazed, solid black eyes dominated the monster's menacing face. Gills pocketed its neck, appearing to be slashes made by a knife. Elongated arms that extended from the bony sides of the creature extended in pale, webbed hands with inch-long claws jutting out from its grotesque fingers. It had fins, too, where its hair should have been, and on its forearms. The most disturbing part of the monster was below the torso, where its legs should have been, was instead a mass of thick tentacles that wriggled and squirmed around like worms in a bucket. It clutched its spear firmly as it opened its mouth, revealing several rows of needle-like teeth. Nothing escaped its mouth except a deafening screech that could be nothing but a war call. Instantly, the thudding began again, but this time faster and much more furiously. The creature that we did see whipped its spear at our windshield, rattling it uneasily, giving the impression that while strong, it was not impervious to damage. "We have to get the hell out of here!" I heard Barry shout. I once again grabbed the joysticks that controlled the arms of our vessel. I swatted crazily at the pack of devils that surrounded us, but it was hopeless. One of them grabbed the left arm with its jagged teeth and ripped it off like it was a chicken on a bone. These creatures were strong, intelligent, and out for blood. Another ripped the other arm off, as a spear ricocheted off the glass again. We were in trouble. We were at their mercy as they teamed up on us like a pack of wolves. "Pull her up!" cried Barry. I jumped into gear. As much as I loved the sea, I refused to die down there in that metallic coffin. I shifted our propellers downward, and shot our submarine up as fast as the damn thing could go. The mer demons gave chase. They didn't want us to leave. I counted 13 more spear hits before we were out of the trench, and desperately radioing in for extraction. We waited at the surface of the water in the Triton for less than 5 minutes before the helicopter came. I guess they heard the desperation in our voices. It hovered above our heads and released the rope ladder for us to climb to our escape, away from that watery hell. I hopped on first and began my ascent up. Barry began to climb after me when suddenly, an all too familiar tentacle burst from the surface, wrapping around his leg firmly. Before I could even scream, he was below the waves and out of reach. There was nothing I could do. Barry's life had been claimed by what he loved so much, the ocean. I did not just lose my best friend on that dreadful day. I lost my passion. It has turned into an undying fear of water. I can hardly take a bath without the thought of a dreaded tentacle bursting through the drain and finishing the job, dragging me back down to the depths. I will never return to the ocean. Well, that was really good. I like that one. The ending was a little cliche with the guy getting pulled down, but other than that, I thought it was really interesting. Okay. This one is called Dark Circles in the Ocean. And yes, all of the ones I'm reading tonight are going to be based off of ocean stuff. It started 3 months ago. The dark spots in the water. I'm residing at my seaside cottage, my own personal getaway that I purchased 3 years ago. The back deck looks out on the Sound, along the shore of the Outer Banks of North Carolina. It's always been one of my favorite vacation locations, and when I published my 3rd book last year, the royalties allowed me to buy this cottage. I don't have any neighbors. I specifically wanted it that way. I planned to write my 4th book here and wanted to ensure peace and quiet while I worked away at it. There's a little pier that stretches out into the Sound from beneath my deck. The sound of the water gently slapping against the wood stimulates my creative mind like nothing else can. I was sitting on the dock a couple days ago when I noticed it for the first time. The dark spots in the water. They were circular and about 4 feet in circumference. I counted 4 of them, about 20 feet from where I stood at the end of the pier. The sun was setting, strips of blank cloud colored by scars of brilliant soft orange. The water caught the light and made it sparkle, a twinkling of stars on the gently surface. Except for the circles of black, those patches seemed to absorb the light, sucking it down into itself. It was curious, and I speculated that maybe the water was just deeper in those spots. I sipped my glass of water at the end of the pier, the ice clinking against the rim like muffled bells. I didn't know what to make of my discovery. Instead of dwelling on it any longer, I went inside, determined to finish another page of my book before I went to bed. Outside, the water filled with 2 more dark spots. The next day, the sky filled with angry storm clouds, and I sat by the big bay window, clacking away at my keyboard as the rain crashed into the ocean before me. Most people don't like rainy days, but as a writer, I feel they are almost always my most productive. The cozy atmosphere, the steady pitter-patter of rain, the rolling thunder, all of these things spark my creativity, and the words just come pouring out like the water from the clouds above. I was watching the waves, circling the next scene of my book and thinking, when I spotted the dark circles again. One of them was right at the end of the pier. Another 5 spread around it. I idly tapped my finger against my desk, watching them. They had moved since yesterday. I discarded my theory of depth change and instead wondered if it was a school of fish. It didn't explain the way they sucked in the light, but I wasn't an expert of the ocean and its many workings. I stood up, allowing myself a brief break from my work, and went to the door. I opened it, the overhang shielding me from the rain, and breathed in the wet air. The air was fresh, smelling of new rain and ocean salt. I breathed it in and winced, the wind suddenly carrying a new odor. Something foul and sharp, burning my nose with its propulsive aroma. I covered my face with a hand, trying not to gag. It was sharp, like vinegar almost, and I felt my eyes water. I slammed the door again closed and retreated back inside. I went to my desk and took a seat, wiping the remains of the smell from my nose. I looked out into the water. The dark patches of water had moved closer to the house. That night I could not sleep. I had awoken only an hour after going to bed and couldn't will my mind back into sweet slumber. I went to my back deck and stood in the darkness, watching the water, letting the repetitive lapping of waves slow my mind. It was something I had done before when I couldn't sleep, my mind still buzzing with ideas and worries. The wind whipped my hair across my face. A warm breeze filled with the ocean scents. The moon spilled its white light onto the water and lit the tiny peaks of rolling waves. I listened to them smack against the pier before me and breathed in the atmosphere. And that's when I heard humming. At first I thought it was just the wind, but as I trained my ears, I realized it was coming from the water. It was soft, but there was a definite melody to the low rise of deep vocals. It almost sounded like chanting. My eyes settled over the dark patches of water. I hadn't even noticed them there in the night, but when I actually looked, I could see the light of the moon around the edge of their murky perimeter. But no light filled the center. Instead, it remained as black as the deepest corners of space. And the humming was definitely coming from the ebony patches of still water. Something about the ominous sound chilled me to the bone. A slow, sad tune that carried in the wind with haunting purpose. It raised the hair on the back of my neck, and I leaned down over the railing to get a better look. The circles were close to the wooden edge of my house, where the water met a wall just below my deck. The pier stretched out from that wall, resting on the surface of the sound like a red carpet. I took the steps down my porch and walked under the deck to the pier. My bare feet padded across the wood, and the sound of the humming became more pronounced. I looked to my right and saw a few of the circles slowly moving back and forth like they were being carried on the tide. What the hell? I thought, starting out. And that's when something stirred the surface of the water. It came with a sudden splash and a slice of white froth. In the center of each of the circles, something emerged for a split second. It was so sudden and the darkness so deep that I couldn't see what it was, but it scared me half to death. It had all happened seamlessly and in sync. At the exact same moment, they all had mirrored the exact same action. I didn't know what it meant, didn't know if I was dealing with animals or nature, but I knew I was suddenly feeling very uncomfortable. I raced back to the deck, my ears filling with the strange, sad humming, and I was about to go back inside. As I was about to go back inside, I was slammed with the awful stench again. I retched as the wind carried it down my throat and felt my eyes tear up. I grabbed the door and pulled it open, desperate to get away from the horrific smell. I stumbled inside and slammed the door shut. I stood against it, breathing heavily. And then I heard something heavy thunk onto the pier outside. It came in a rush of water and weight, a loud exclamation in the night. Eyes widening, I turned to look out the sliding glass door. In the moonlight, I saw the source of the dark circles. It stemmed from a huge conch shell, the walls of its curling spiral so dark it made the night glow around it. Worming out of the opening was a long coil of pink flesh, shining with dripping water. It was thick and oozing, like an infected tongue, and at the end of its 2-foot span was the torso of a person. It grew out of the pulsing, shimmering muscle, and its face was bloated and waterlogged. Its eyes were black, and a smile ripped up its face like a deep gash on its noseless face. And it was humming. The notes carried in the night air and filled me with crippling dread. It was a song of death, a prelude to carnage. It pulled itself along the pier towards my house on long, fingerless slabs of squirming flesh. They smacked wetly along the wood as it dragged its huge shell behind it. The grating sound screeching in my ears. Even from behind the door I could smell the creature. It was the same awful reeking plague I had smelled earlier. As I watched in horror, another one pulled itself out of the water, humming and grinning, hoisting its giant shell out of the water like the hull of a ship. Water spilled over the pier in great waves as it followed the first one. The humming continued, gaining in volume, and I suddenly was overcome with an urge to just stand and listen. The notes churned my stomach, but I had an unexplainable urge to wait for the creature to reach me. Suddenly, the horror of the situation crashed down around me like a wave at high tide. I snapped out of my trance and slammed my hands over my ears. I couldn't let them get to me. I had to get away. If they reached me, I knew I wouldn't be alive come morning. I didn't know what those things were, but what they wanted, but terror rose like a bile in my throat. That's just how it's written. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, that's just how it's written. I grabbed my car keys as another one pulled itself up the barrier beneath my house. I could hear it flopping onto the strip of sand beneath my deck, and I knew I didn't have long. I practically kicked my front door open and raced to the car. I jammed the key into the lock and twisted, throwing the door open. I heard something crash from inside and realized that the first one had just broken in. The thought of the monster pulling itself through my house sent a bolt of adrenaline coursing through me. I dove into the car and started it, slamming the gears into reverse. I turned on my headlights and my heart thundered in my chest. One of them was in the open doorway, its worm-like arm sliding along its frame. It was grinning at me, a deep hum echoing towards me. For a split second, I almost pulled back into the driveway, but the fresh adrenaline was enough to force reason upon my confused mind. I gunned the engine and raced towards town. To this day, I had no idea what those things were. I told the police and local wildlife rangers about my experience, but obviously they don't believe me. To them, I'm just a new resident, unused to the ways of the ocean. I put the house up for sale and haven't returned to it since. I don't dare. I tried talking to the local fishermen about the dark circles in the water, but they cut me off as soon as I mentioned them. They told me I shouldn't talk about such things, hushing me with a quick wave of their hand. They get a look in their eye that scares me, but also tells me I'm not insane. I don't know what I've witnessed, what those creatures were, or what they wanted. Just thinking about it terrifies me. I know one thing, though. I'm never going near the ocean again. Something tells me I'd hear humming. Something tells me those creatures will return to catch the one that got away. Huh. That was really good. I like that. I thought that was really good. Well. Okay. 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 Next one's called I dove to depths uncharted. They should have stayed that way. Let me get another sip of my drink. Alright. Let's do it. The first thought that crossed my mind as I hit the water was how warm it was. We left for Galapagos in mid-December, arriving on site towards the end of the month. I thought it would be cold. December had always been a time of cold nights and long snowing days for me, so when I broke the water and was greeted not by an icy wall of goosebumps-inducing darkness, but a comfortable lukewarm ocean, I was pleasantly surprised. An unpleasant surprise followed shortly after, as the radio in my ear blared to life. The voice of Anne, already grainy and hard to make out despite being only 15 feet above me. Highlighting the budgetary shortcomings of our expedition. Ground control to Kappa 1. Actually, I wouldn't be ground control, would I? Since I'm, not on the ground. What would you call the boat version of ground control? Anne asked, our new radio quickly becoming a toy in her eyes. Now hang on, why am I Kappa 1? I called back into the radio, ignoring her question, that I admittedly did not know the answer to. Because Kappas live in the water, duh, she called back rather matter-of-factly before giggling at her own cleverness. A splash is heard some distances to my left before the radio picks up again. A man's voice this time. This is Kappa 2, I'm in the water. Brett called out, our youngest member, though he had been with the company longer than I had. You don't You don't need to say that. I watched you jump in, Anne called, chastising. I know, just couldn't let you two have all the fun with my new radio, Brett rebutted, while I was slowly starting to regret our buying the thing. Alright, enough playing around. We're wasting sunlight, came the voice of our senior, Robert. He was as no-nonsense as ever, although this was somewhat endearing of him. He always kept a cool head on his shoulders and kept us focused. Jason, move into the bell. Brett, retrieve the C scooter and join him. We want this done before sunset. Robert directed over through the radio. I wasted no time swimming over to the large device dangling from our boat by a thick metal cable. It was almost shaped like a bell, as our nickname suggested, a large bottom-heavy structure that narrowed at the top and widened at the bottom. It was around 7 feet tall and half that in diameter. 4 small round windows positioned on its north, south, west, and eastmost sides, and one large hatch on the bottom. As I moved to climb inside this hatch, Brett joined me at my side, using the sea scooter to catch up. Its light illuminated the diving chamber of the dark ocean water. I was a little jealous that Robert had chosen him to pioneer the ski scooter for our company, and not me. It was a small device, no bigger than the motor of a weed whacker. At its rear were 2 handles with a small lever to pull on the right, and a button for the light on the left. Attached to these handles was the motor, a loud thing, strong enough to turn the blades at the front of the device to propel its occupant forward faster than they could swim. Just beyond the propellers, right in the center, was a large light. I could see Brett's smile showing through the thin glass of his mask as he delighted in his new toy, and we both climbed into the chamber, sealing it shut behind us while it began to build pressure. I took a seat opposite Brett, and we could feel the chamber moving, sinking through the water a few feet at a time. It was an odd sensation. The water inside didn't jostle or move, but we could feel the world pulling upon us as we sank down, deeper and deeper. Robert's voice came over the radio again, growing fuzzier, but not so much that we couldn't make it out. Remember to watch your deep gauges and don't go too deep. Those suits the NOAA lent us will get you to the vents, and maybe a little deeper. Let's not find out how much deeper. Just chart the entrance of the trench, leave your markers, and get back to the bell. Roger, roger, Brett called into the radio, and I heard Robert let out a sigh. Now we started to wait. As the chamber sank into the depths, it built pressure to acclimate us to the pressure of the ocean at our desired depth. That way we could get out, do our work, and decompress in the bell instead of doing decompression stops in open water, which was going to be nice, as decompression from this depth should take close to 14 hours. Our air tanks hooked up to tubes in the bell, running up the cord of the bell all the way up to the surface, so we shouldn't have to worry about running out of air. I stared at the depth gauge on my left wrist, watching it tick up as it worked even from within the bell, ticking past 1,000 meters already. It was nice to have such a fancy bit of hardware in the form of these suits. Our bell and scooter were as outdated as they get, and our boat was on her last sea legs. This job could have been the start of something new. With any luck, it would lead to more business with the NOAA, and our little diving shop might make it big. There is an ad in the middle of the story. I am not kidding. Wow. Okay. Okay, here we go. I found it. We're good. I thought I would have to do something. Suddenly, a question shot to the front of my mind. A question I aired over the radio to our captain. Why us? My question was met with silence at first, and a funny look from Brett before he spoke up. Well, because Anne doesn't dive. She mans the ship, and Robert's too old to make it down here anymore. Careful, too. You know he's sensitive. Anne teased back at us, and Robert let out what could have been a chuckle or maybe a cough. It was hard to tell. That's not what I mean. I mean, why did the NOAA hire us for this? Don't they have divers and divers with better gear? Divers they trust with these fancy suits a hell of a lot more than a basically unheard of diving team? There was a long silence after this. I thought maybe he knew the answer but didn't want to say. It seemed everyone took a few moments to ponder this question. Or maybe the others were waiting for our captain's response like I was. Regardless, our thoughts were interrupted by the bell jerking to a stop, causing us to swing and sway in the water before we steadied again. Brett was up first, hands cupped around his eyes at the window, searching for whatever it was we came here for. No, that can't be right, he mumbled to himself before beginning to undo the hatch. I moved to the window to see whatever it was he saw, but I saw nothing. An endless expanse of dark water lay before me. At least I think it did. It was dark, and I couldn't make out much. What is it? I don't see anything. My eyes didn't leave the window as I asked, waiting to see some colossal beast swim by or some ravaged sea life. My mind started to swim as I waited for his answer. He didn't reply. Not until he had left the bell, ducking out into the water and drifting just below the hatch, floating motionless in place as he looked out at the surrounding ocean. The lights of the bell finally clicking on, revealing more of the nothingness around us. That's the problem. Check your depth gauge. And as I did as he instructed, reeling out our depth. We were 26,000 meters below the surface, the deepest anyone had ever gone without a submersible. The vents, he started. We should have hit the floor 50 meters ago. This can't be the right place. The hydrothermal vents are gone. He sounded angry and a little confused. Robert called to him over the radio, trying to calm him down. Brett, it's a newly formed trench. The vents are still there, just moved. If we get back into the bell, we can adjust position until we find the edge. It shouldn't be more than a few dozen meters away. Brett ignored him, swimming away from the bell now. Brett! I called out. Stay near the bell! If you get lost down here, we'll I was cut off before I could finish. Brett started to shout into the radio, turning his sea scooter on and propelling forward. With me, following along against my better judgment, trying to keep a mental note of where the bell was. No, this is impossible! The edge isn't a dozen meters away. There is no edge. This trench is massive. A trench this large forming and so close to land, there should have been tsunamis and earthquakes. This kind of damage doesn't just happen without anyone noticing. We are at 27,000 meters and getting deeper by the second as he searched for the ocean floor. Comms were quiet for a few moments before Anne spoke up. Brett, it's okay. I need you to go back to the bell. We'll figure this out. And I'm sure the NOAA have an explanation for what happened here. She spoke soothingly, and Brett slowed, coming to a stop at 27,550 meters, with me just a few behind him. He took in a breath, looking around the expansive ocean before us. He'd always been more of an environmentalist than I. I can't imagine how seeing such an important part of sea life cease to exist must have made him feel. I put a hand on his shoulder, trying to guide him back. Come on, let's get back to the bell. The sooner we get this done, the sooner we can get answers. He looked back at me, his face betraying how upset he was as he tried to sound calm. He didn't look angry anymore, just sad. Maybe that was worse. Yeah, okay. He spoke softly and with a sigh, started to position the scooter to take us back when suddenly we saw something. What is that? Brett asked, his tone curious as a small dark object slowly floated up towards us from the chasm below. It looks like a fish, he offered, and he seemed to be right. A small skinny fish was floating up between us, at our legs now. Robert's concerned voice came over the radio, each word dripping worry. What do you see? Are you two alright? Anne was also talking now, her voice quiet and meek. Is there something down there with you? The fish kept on rising. It wasn't swimming. Its side was facing up, tail dragging behind it, and one empty eye socket pointed to the sky. And it was covered in what looked like red seaweed, wriggling and waving in the light ocean current. It looks like a dead fish. It's just floating here, Brett finally answered, though his calm demeanor was broken by what I said, and what we saw next. Hey, there are more, look! I pointed down, seeing dark shapes rising towards the surface from below. Dozens of them. Fish, turtles, stingrays, all looking half decayed, none moving. Each one was covered in the red seaweed. Some had much bigger patches of it on them than others, and as the fish rose closer to us, we could see at least half of them. We could see at last that it was not seaweed, but looked to be worms of sort, sticking out of dozens of small holes in their skin. They were skinny and long, each one waving around the water as though feeling for something else to latch onto. At what appeared to be their head was a single disc-like growth, flat and skinny, but relatively wide, maybe an inch and a half in diameter. Brett slowly reached towards the thing, his hand tentative, but driven on by his growing curiosity. As his hand approached the fish, I thought to stop him, to reach out and swat his hand away, or to tell him no. Instead, movements made clumsy by the water all around us, I reached out and touched the fish. Instantly, the worms had driven the flat growths of their heads against my suit's glove, and I felt an awful pinching sensation as they wriggled and shook violently. I let out a yelp, shaking my hand as I tried to dislodge the creatures, but they held fast. The pain in my hand increasing as my panic rose. I thought to grab them and pry them off, but I feared more were inside the corpse of the fish, waiting to latch onto me and exacerbate the situation. Finally, Brett grabbed my wrist and, with his knife, cut at the wretched things. They held for a few cuts before withdrawing into the fish, releasing my glove. None of them had been severed by his knife. I looked at my shaking hand, sucking in deep breaths as I tried to calm myself. The voices of Robert and Anne cutting each other off as they tried to ask me what was wrong, what was happening to me, and demanding we return to the bell. My glove had several large indents in the material. The gloves were a strong fabric, but here it seemed they were almost chewed through. Long, cut-like scrapes in circles moving towards a central point where each of the worms had held onto me. Brett's voice came over the radio. The other two resigned to not get an answer and clearing the comms. "It's all right. They didn't get in. Captain, there are some sort of worms living in the dead sea life down here. Definitely unfriendly. We're going back to the bell and we're getting ready to get back to the bell. Get ready to take us up. I'll get on the radio with the Coast Guard. Anne, man the crane." Robert's voice was stern and commanding. It was comforting to have someone sound collected and in control of the situation. Looking around us, we're not in control. Dead sea life was all around us, slowly moving past as they floated for the surface. It was like a swarm of jellyfish, and we didn't want to get close and touch any of them. But if we didn't move, more would float up and surely touch us. Looking around, I didn't even know where the bell was. We had left it so long ago, and orientating yourself in the open ocean was like spinning around in a pitch-black room, and then trying to find the bed. "Where's the bell?" I asked, more to myself than anyone else. Anne and Robert couldn't help us reach it. The best they could do is keep it in place and hope we could see the lights again. We have to get back to the way we came. Just go nice and slow, and I'll use the scooter to push them out of the way. Brett presented his plan, and it sounded like a good one. He moved in front of me, using the light of a sea scooter to shine us a clear path, and turned the engine on. This was a mistake. Once the engine turned on, the sea life stopped moving. Each one close enough for us to see stopped dead in their tracks, no longer drifting towards the surface. "What the fuck?" Brett choked out, before slowly, but surely, each decaying fish began to move towards us. Where before we had a path, we were now slowly being closed in on by a mass of dead animals, worms reaching with all their might towards us. Brett's voice was scared now, lacking the determination. His plan had afforded it before. "Captain, they're coming towards us! We can't slip past! Not this many!" he cried out, pointing to the light of the scooter around it like it was some sort of gun to hold them back. Not that they responded. They crawled on, moving closer and closer. "Stay calm, son. There has to be a way out. Just stay calm and keep looking around. There are Coast Guard ships on the way now," Robert assured us over the radio. I knew it wouldn't matter. Even if the Coast Guard were here now, they could never make it to these depths. Not without our suits. Maybe with a submersible, but then what would they do? Ram the things out of the way? I kept this to myself, not wanting to upset Brett any more than he already was. I needed him to come up with a plan like before, some way to get us out of here. It struck me then. If I were wrong, well, we wouldn't need the sea scooter anyway. I reached out and grabbed it, pulling it away from him. Hey, don't you leave me here!" he cried out, fear in his eyes as he held tight. But it didn't matter. I was bigger than him, and after a brief tussle, I had the scooter. I pointed it away from us, turned the engine up to medium, and let go, watching it drift away from us. What are you doing?" Brett demanded, grabbing my shoulder and spinning around to face him. "We needed that! You've killed us both!" Around this time, the first fish drifted past us, towards the direction of the sea scooter. He let go and turned around. We had to dodge them a bit, but they were moving past us, leaving us alone. "I think they were drawn to sound. When you turned it on, they came towards it, so I turned it up and sent it away," I explained, trying to keep him calm. "Well, you could have just said that, asshole!" He was still angry, but too relieved to hold on to it. He turned, and we both started to swim. making our way to where he claimed the bell was, careful to avoid the sea life that hadn't been close enough to notice the sea scooter. With each passing meter, I grew more concerned. If this was the wrong direction, we were only getting ourselves more lost, and these dead things, were still here with us. A little more spread out, but they were here, and I was worried more would come, and it would become too dense a group to swim through. As my fears began to bubble to the surface and form words in my throat, my thoughts were interrupted again when Brett shouted over the radio, "There it is! Light! I can see the bell!" I swam a bit faster, straining to see what he saw, and sure enough, just ahead, there was light. He swam towards it, fast, waving his arms and breathing heavily as he raced for it, ignoring the fish floating around him and rushing for the bell. As we got close, I began to notice something. There was something big just below it. "Brett, stop! There's something there!" I tried to call, but over his frantic breathing, the radio was too garbled for him to understand. Maybe he thought I was celebrating as well. I should have tried harder, yelled louder or something. But I didn't. Didn't think he would be able to hear me. And as he neared the bell, the thing below rose into the light, coming into view and freezing him in his tracks. It was a whale. A huge humpback whale. But this one wasn't dead. And it wasn't drifting. Though just barely. It had huge holes all along its left side in tightly packed clusters. The skin they clustered on was swollen and infected, the holes leaking a dark fluid into the water. Its body was lumpy, long tubular growths protruding all down its back and to its tail, and these bumps wriggled and moved, twitching and causing the body to move along with them. One of its eye sockets was empty, and the other eye, while still there, had a large hole in it, with a huge worm sticking out of the front. It slowly approached Brett. Its one big eye locked onto him as the worm reached for him, both of us frozen in shock. As it neared him, the whale let out an awful sound, a groan of pain and anguish as its mouth was pushed open by a mass of worms inside. They reached out, latching onto Brett, causing him to jolt to action again, flailing and screaming, jabbing at them with his knife to no avail as one latched onto his face, slowly pulling him into the mouth. He screamed into it, screamed and cried, and fought for all he was worth, but he wasn't getting away, and I only watched as it took him. Once he was gone and the mouth was closed, the screams did not stop. They kept coming over the radio, drowning out anything anyone else might have tried to say. The whale then slowly sank, leaving the light of the bell and vanishing into the darkness. I wasted no time swimming for all I was worth, looking at the bell and hoping that maybe if I didn't look, I wouldn't have to see it rising to swallow me too. But it didn't swallow me. It didn't return as I swam into the bell. It didn't attack me as I sealed the hatch and pressed the button to return me to the surface. And it didn't rip the bell from the ship and sink me to the ocean floor as I waited for the bell to slowly rise out of the depths. But he did scream. He screamed the whole way. And as he did, his screams slowly became groans of pain, muffled by whatever it was that had him. And just when I thought I couldn't take the screams anymore, he spoke. He begged. He begged not for his life, not for rescue, not for me to come back and save him. He begged me to kill him. Pleaded with me in a voice so weak and with breath so raspy, breathing wheezily, unnaturally. He pleaded with me, and with God, and with the devil, to kill him and free him from the pain he suffered. And when our radios finally disconnected, I wept, and I hoped he got his wish. I don't dive anymore. I man the crane, but I'll never get in that water again. I'd leave, say goodbye to this life and to the water forever, but I can't do that to Robert and Ann. I can't leave them and this business behind after what we went through together. So I man the boat, and I lower the bell. But I don't think the ocean is safe anymore. Because sometimes, on long jobs during late nights on the water, our radio will pick up something, and it's always staticky. And it's hard to make out, but I know what it is. He's still begging for us to kill him. That was really good. Long one, but really good. Heh, long. Alright. I will read one more, and then I'll be done. Alright. Whoops. Didn't mean to click that. Alright. Okay, I'm just making sure I got it. Oh, okay, so this one's not finished. Okay, so that one's not finished. Alright. Alright. Okay. This one is called Spearhead Unlit Frontier. Take another sip of my drink real quick. The message has been smuggled via a plain text file saved to a micro SD that I pray survived its trip to the surface. If the journalist or civilian receiving this can read this message, I am posting covertly from a deep marine lab that officially does not exist. Its code name, as of this message, is Spearhead Unlit Frontier. Sulfur. We're in the relative shallows of Izu Ogasawara Trench, submerged at just around 4,500 meters beneath the surface of the ocean. We are funded by the American government and have been since the early Cold War. This base's foundations were laid down starting in the early 1960s as an unannounced companion project to the lunar missions. We were tasked with beating the Soviets to colonize the depths of the ocean. More recently, we've been up to miscellaneous research projects that would never be allowed anywhere else. Just like Edward Snowden with the NSA, I'm a contractor who has become grossly disillusioned. Unlike Snowden, however, I believe that I can maintain my deep cover a little longer. I have to. There is so much to be uncovered. I haven't even began to understand the depths of it. There is so much that the world still needs to know. I've been secretly transcribing all the strange security dispatches, and the all-personnel emergency alerts that come in over the radio. Whenever I'm alone, it's easy enough to turn my computer towards the wall a little and start typing. There's a lot I've been missing, though. I also started writing down the strange conversation I've overheard in the lab. In the past months, I even received additional permissions to the lab's in-transit communications. This lets me listen in on some radio silence phone line chatter. I'll do my best to contextualize the different conversations you'll be reading, but I still don't have many answers. Item 1. Non-responsive sailors. Security dispatch. Dispatch message. Attention! All security units! Attention! All security units! A mid-sized civilian surface vessel has been sighted within sulfur-controlled waters. It is believed that the crew is missing or incapacitated. Because there has been no response from the bridge, there has also been no visual confirmation of deckhands. The ship poses a security risk and is to be towed to salvage zone waters and then scuttled for reclamation after sinking. Author's Note 1. There are surface rigs that take staff beneath the surface of the ocean via cable elevator. It is an entirely separate security ecosystem from the one in the research labs. Circumstances allow me to witness some of this event myself because I had only just arrived at the surface intake. I was waiting to be taken down to the labs. Security dispatch logs are saved in the lab's intranet files, and so I was later able to obtain this transcript below. This was my first hint that things weren't right at Unlit Frontier. Author's Note 2. If the crew was really missing or incapacitated, then why did I hear so much gunfire when the security teams boarded? Who was screaming? Item 2. Spillway failure. All personnel emergency. Alert message. All hands on deck! All hands on deck! A critical spillway failure has been detected near the inlet of hydroelectric main feed 8. The deep ocean spillway appears to have drawn a moored naval mine into itself, triggering an explosion and damaging the inlet port. All staff are to begin consolidation procedure. Check your local sector thoroughly for new leaks, hairline cracks, or structural damage that may have resulted from this incident. Report any trouble or unusual function immediately to supervisory staff. Author's Note 1. How and why did we construct a spillway under the ocean? Where does the water used for Sulfur's undisclosed hydroelectric project end up? How truly massive might the flow of water into these projects be? The spillway apparently is active enough to pull a massive chain-anchored mine into itself. Item 3. Sea lice. Overheard conversation. Technician 1 and Technician 2. Technician 1. The sea nets are coming back ruined. The fish they're catching are no good either. Technician 2. How are the nets bringing back fish if they're ruined? Tech 1. The fish are so mutilated that they're sticking by their own innards. Tech 2. Yuck! Yeah, that's no good. Tech 1. Dry food stuff will have to do for now, at least until we get the problem sorted out. Tech 2. What's the problem exactly? Do we know yet? Tech 1. Crustacean parasites. Isopods, abysmal sea lice, you know the type. Tech 2. That's strange. We've had good luck with the antiparasitic additives so far. Minimal biofouling, and no major chunks taken out of the large specimens we brought in. Tech 1. Until now, yeah. The fish we've been collecting for food supply supplement are coming in looking for Swiss cheese. Coming in looking like Swiss cheese. And the ectoparasites swarm out alive once you pull the nets up over the airlock. Tech 2. And they're immune to the antiparasitics too? Tech 1. They sure seem to be. I mean, they're surviving the airlock. The pressure change doesn't seem to even phase some of the bigger sea lice. Tech 2. Don't even tell me that. I had a nightmare last night that I inhaled some water by mistake during a dive. And then the dream, they tell me that I've got sea lice buried in the inside of my lung. Tech 1. Well, let's step up the biocides in the surrounding waters. There won't even be any fish to catch, but there aren't really much worth eating now anyway. Tech 2. I'll call it in. If the on the frontier ecosystem dies completely, then maybe we can talk command into shipping a crate of freeze-dried meat or beef jerky or something. Tech 1. God, I would kill for some meat from the surface. It's been way too long. Even the idea of freeze-dried makes my mouth water. So, okay. I'll step up the biocide concentration. Tech 2. Yeah, may as well go for it. We've got a long way still before we start to poison the surface waters to any noticeable degree. And now I can't stop thinking about beef jerky. Tech 1. I need to sea lice through the airlock, right? Tech 2. Yeah. Item 4. Unexplained lights. Intranet hosted phone call. Voice 1. Just checking in about the lights. Yeah? The radar shows that the source of it is miles below our deepest cameras. Voice 2. The divers are reporting heat from it, like the sources are much closer. Voice 1. Right, but the radar says they're way deep down. They must be incredibly hot or else transmitting energy on a wavelength that only turns to heat after it hits something besides water. Voice 2. Any idea what the source of the lights could be? Voice 1. Nope, no real guesses from the team. Voice 2. And they just come and go? Like they blip in and out of existence? Voice 1. They seem to. From our perspective, at least. We thought at least they might be magma flows. Volume 2. Well, that sounds plausible. Voice 1. But they move around too much. It's similar to the pattern of travel that a pod mammal makes when it gets separated from its pod. Volume 2. Or Voice 2. But they're way too big to be whales. Voice 1. Right. And all the while, it's producing as much light and thermal energy as an oil refinery's lit flare sack. Voice 2. And then suddenly it's gone again. So we've got no real guesses then. Voice 1. We've got no real guesses, but the lights keep coming back. Sometimes there's more than one. Voice 2. Keep me posted, alright? Volume 1. Or Voice 1. Alright. Item 5. Frozen bodies. Email memorandum. Message text. As a courtesy to all staff, please be advised that several of our guests at Sulfur have unfortunately perished. This was due to an unforeseen complication in one of the research labs. The cause of death is to remain strictly undisclosed, except among supervisory officers. All staff should be aware that the bodies of the guests in question will be stored in Sector 22 cold storage until more suitable arrangements can be made. This is a necessity to prevent decomposition of associated health hazards. Staff working in Sector 22 should do their best to carry on with business as usual. The corpses are not to be handled or moved by Sector 22 staff. Author's note. Sector 22's cold storage lockers also serve as Sulphur's kitchen freezers. I went to have a look at the bodies out of morbid curiosity. The injuries on the deceased were bad, and bordered on mutilation. My visit raised more questions than it answered. Item 6. Unknown megafauna. All hands on deck alert. Alert message. All hands on deck! All hands on deck! An unknown megafauna is currently investigating Sector 21 from the sector's exterior. It appears to have been drawn by the submerged lights in that sector. It may try to gain entry to other visibly lit areas. Immediately extinguish all non-critical sources of light. Available staff assigned to the cephalopod and mollusk research wings are requested to report immediately to Sector 21. All others should consider the sector off-limits until further notice. Author's note. Sector 21 was never reopened, and the cephalopod and mollusk research wings have been shuttered and inactive ever since. Based on the sounds I heard that night, I believe that the creature was successful in breaching the hull of Sector 21. If so, explosive decomposition likely killed all those present. Item 7. Living salvage. Intranet hosted phone call. Voice 1. Any update on the attempted hijacking of Surface Pod 4? Voice 2. Yeah, we've got a whole bunch of dead bodies. Lots to process. Voice 1. Just dead bodies? Voice 2. Well... Voice 1. Is that a complicated question? Voice 1. Voice 2. In a way, it is. Seems like while the hijackers were being processed, a couple of the bodies woke up. Voice 1. Woke up? Voice 2. Like, started moaning and screaming. You know, not totally dead yet. In a few cases, they started feeling well enough to fight us a little. They resisted being processed, I mean. Voice 1. Anybody hurt? Voice 2. Just the salvage that was still alive when it happened. It's all being processed smoothly now, though, in any case. Voice 1. No problems then. Voice 2. Yeah, nobody's gonna miss a few dozen pirates. Voice 1. And Pod 4 is still operational? Voice 2. Not a scratch. Voice 1. Alright, well that's good news. I'll be in touch with the security footage from the hijacking attempt. Voice 2. Don't bother. We know exactly how it all ended up. Voice 1. I guess we do. Alright, thanks. Voice 2. Bye. Item 8. Mimics or ghosts. Overheard conversation. Technician 1. I'm sure that I heard a human voice on piezoelectric hydrophone. Tech 2. You heard feedback coming from inside the labs, I'm telling you. Tech 3. He thinks it's a ghost. Tech 2. He thinks he's a ghost? Tech 1. It wasn't feedback. It was a voice from outside the lab. Tech 3. Tell him what it said to you. That's the important part. Tell him what you think you heard. Tech 2. Come on already. Let's hear it. My break's ending. Tech 1. It said, I'm freezing to death out here. Tech 3. And that's not all it said, right? Tech 1. It said, I'm suffocating. Please. I won't last out here. Tech 2. So, what? You think it's the ghost of someone who drowned? Tech 3. I've been saying it must be some kind of mimic behavior. Something biological imitating a human voice. Tech 2. You really believe he heard something? The simplest explanation, by far, is that he's just cracking up from the long hours. Tech 3. I've heard something like what he describes. There's no such thing as ghosts, though. Tech 1. I'm not so sure. Tech 3. A living mimic is way scarier than a ghost, though. If you think about it, a ghost is just a spirit reliving its last moments. It's basically the essence of a human. But see, a mimic is some unknown creature. It's a real thing that's pretending to be human to get inside the facility. It's pretending to need help. Even just to get at us. That's much more troubling if you ask me. Tech 2. You guys are both losing it. That's my assessment. Tech 3. You haven't done a week on the hydrophones yet. We'll see what you say after you rotate. There's voices out there, and a human voice doesn't carry through the water like that. Tech 1. There's definitely something out there, and it's speaking to sulfur from very nearby. Item 9. Guest liability. Security dispatch. Dispatch message. Attention all security units. Attention all security units. Contractor 434838525 has become a guest liability. Prioritize making contact with contractor 434838525. His location is unknown. He may be in hiding or armed with makeshift weapons. Security teams are instructed to prioritize resolving the guest liability. Author's note. I believe this was an attempted escape by an unlit Frontier staff member. I think that this dispatch message was a coded instruction to... excuse me. I think that this dispatch message was a coded instruction to murder the guest who is causing trouble. The facility will do anything to defend its secrets. This means that you might never receive another message from me, but I swear what I say is true. I will do my best to keep shedding light on the darkness here. God help us all. And that's it. Okay. Hmm. I'm trying to find like one that's short. I don't want to end it here, because, like... Okay, this one's not that long. Okay. I'm gonna read a classic one. This one is the final one we'll read today. The Rake. During the summer of 2003, events in the northeastern United States involved a strange, human-like creature, sparked brief local media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Little or no information was left intact, as most online and written accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed. Primarily focused in rural New York State and once found in Idaho, self-proclaimed witnesses told story of their encounters with a creature of unknown origin. Emotions ranged from extreme traumatic levels of fright and discomfort to an almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their published versions are no longer on record, the memories remain powerful. Several of the involved parties began looking for answers later that year. In early 2006, the collaboration had accumulated nearly 24 documents dating between the 12th century and present day, spanning 4 continents. In almost all cases, their stories were identical. I've been in contact with a member of this group and was able to get some excerpts from their upcoming book. A Suicide Note, 1964. As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I've introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again I awoke and heard his voice and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next wake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye. Found in the same wooden box were 2 empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose, and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope. Dearest Lenny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name. A journal entry, translated from Spanish, 1880. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand, I will not sleep. His voice, unintelligible text. A mariner's log, 1691. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We should not return here again at the request of the rake. From a witness, 2006. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving. So my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up, thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he had gotten out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly his knee almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for a half second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, or a large, hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed, and then crawled quickly in a flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5, it just seemed like a while, just looking at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway, leading to the kids' rooms. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch and on the wall and saw my daughter Clara. The creature ran down the stairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in a short life. She said, "He is the rake." My husband drove his car into a lake later that night, while rushing our daughter to the hospital. They did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now refer to as the rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of the series of events with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the second week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. This still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and now I believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I have not seen the rake since he ruined my life, but I know he has been in my room while I slept. I know and fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me. And that's it. That is the rake. I can see why it's a classic. Like, it's really well done. Like, it's a really interesting story. So, that's it. Alright, well, this was fun. Like, I had a great time doing this again. I'll be back next Saturday to do even more. I know this was kind of a shorter, slightly shorter episode, but I gotta run because I got some stuff to do. So, yeah, thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you next week.